Nikki Sinclair, thank you very much for accepting our invitation.
Pleasure.
We know that you oppose the idea to create a 21 billion fund for youth devoted to for the employment. So why you don't think this socialistic idea is not good enough?
Well, it's not that I necessarily oppose 21 billion being spent on helping solving youth unemployment. I mean, it's such an endemic problem across the European Union. What I would question was, is it being spent in the correct way? Is it being spent in a way that's very kind of, it just solves the outward problem? It doesn't work, it doesn't solve the problem deep. I mean, in the UK, for example, 85% of all employment is furnished by small businesses. And small businesses, and they tell me, you know, as their MEP, they say the EU is regulating us too much. We can't afford to employ people. Now, if that 21 billion, for example, you know, we've got there was REACH, which I'm glad to see the Commission now understand that was a problem, but you had to have all those chemicals tested. Therefore, that was an expense that businesses had to go through. And also, you've got this current situation with electronic cigarettes, and they're trying to put relist those as a medicine, which means there would be £80,000 would have to be used on research. My argument is that actually, if that 21 billion was to help small businesses implement these regulations, in fact, therefore those small businesses could employ people. I mean, it was only 2 years ago that President Barroso said in Chamber, if every small business employed one more person, we would eradicate unemployment overnight. But you've got to make those conditions right, and that's why I'm opposing. I certainly don't oppose any investment in youth. In fact, I would like to see far more investment in youth. It's just the way that I think the socialists think that they can throw money at a problem and it will solve. No, you've got to actually look what the problem really is, and why are businesses not employing people, and especially not employing young people. And I think you need to actually help those businesses hand in hand employing people.
What about the education of youth?
Well, education's important, but the education should go hand in hand with these jobs. You know, I would like to see much more investment in apprenticeships, but apprenticeships in partnership with businesses. By just throwing training courses, that doesn't, you know, you may have a certificate at the end of a training course, but that certificate does not pay you a wage after the course is finished. You need to have it hand-in-hand with business, and that's where the socialists go wrong. They just throw money, expect that to solve the problem. Actually, you need partnerships, and it's something that the socialists should wake up to.
Nikki Sinclair, what's your recipe for Spain, if you have any?
Well, I think it's the same recipe for Cyprus, Ireland, and Greece, and Portugal. The problem is they're in a club that they cannot afford to be in. They really need to devalue their currency and to become competitive again. And of course, they can't devalue their currency while they stay within the single currency, and they're in a problem. And you know, the EU, the euro is a political project, not an economic project, and that's what the core of the problem. I think we need to set free those countries so they can go back to their peseta and drachma and punt, etc., and be able to be competitive again. Because, you know, Iceland was in this problem a few years ago, and they were able to devalue their currency because they're outside the EU, and they became more competitive again.
Nikki Sinclair, what about China and the other global challenges? Does it make sense in global world to fall apart? Because now economically Europe is an entity of 400 million people. It's a solid bloc that can be equal to the other superpowers, and especially to China, which is sort of emerging assertive superpower. Do you think that if it's all falling apart, if it's all scattered, Europe will still matter?
Well, you're quite right. China and India, and of course the Pacific Rim are growing economies. And you're saying about us being a bloc, but the EU may be a bloc, but it's a cracked bloc. It's because of the eurozone crisis, and that countries such as Cyprus and Greece and Spain and Portugal can really no longer afford to be in there, and their economies cannot recover while they can't devalue. So how does that make us competitive as a whole? How can we be competitive in China when we have this soft underbelly of Europe?
But can't we overcome the difficulties reforming the European Union and are expecting a brighter future that way.
Well, good luck with that. I mean, that's what they've been talking about for the last 4 years, and it's not working. It's more reform, it's more Europe. But Europe is the problem. We're not feeding these countries the antidote, we're actually feeding them more of the poison. Because more and more Europe, I mean, you just have to look, I mean, you've got the state broadcast in Greece closing down. You know, you have austerity in Greece. You know, we had the debacle in Cyprus where there was a threat of ordinary people's savings being taken, people's pension funds, etc., etc. Is that the type of Europe that was promised to all these people? Of course it wasn't. And how is that competitive with China? Really, would you as an investor, now that threat was there, and of course to larger savers in Cyprus, they did lose a percentage of their savings. How is that saying investors from outside the EU? If I was a large investor outside the EU, the last place I'd want to put my money is in the EU.
Nikki Sinclair, don't European Union have a responsibility for these countries that stayed for a long time within the system and that those whose behaviour were not corrected? Is it fair now to expel them?
Well, it's not expelling them. I would actually say that they should leave of their own because I think it is better for them. But, you know, is it then fair for countries like the United Kingdom who took no part of this and who actually warned? The Maastricht convergence criteria was actually proposed by the United Kingdom, and many of the countries, including France, did not conform to the convergence criteria at the time that the single currency was introduced. So this was just waiting to happen. Why should people of the UK, what responsibility do the people of the UK who didn't take part of the Eurozone to continually subsidise these countries or put guarantees via the IMF when we in the UK have crippling cutbacks? You know, big charities beginning, you know, I work with food banks. You know, the UK is 6th richest country in the world, and we have more and more people dependent on food banks. And yet we're supposed to pay more into the European Union to pay for this political folly. People don't want to do that in the UK anymore.
Thank you very much,
Pleasure.
Nikki Sinclair.